Hello and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for logging in today for our virtual cocktail series, Manhattan Madness. Really excited to do this one. It's been a class that I've been kind of toying around doing for a while, and just really excited to be able to do it in this format. I think it's going to be exciting to have the same cocktail in a variety of different styles, and I think it's something that not a lot of people have experienced other than the classic Manhattan. Carmen, I do apologize. I see you saying hi to Nate. I'm not Nate. Hello. My name is Scott Smits. I am the floor director here at Ray's, and I guess you could say Ray's appointed cocktail guy, cocktail enthusiast. Hi, Sean. Really excited. Really excited to kind of get going with this one. I do apologize. I'm talking a little fast. I'm excited. Really, what I wanted to kind of get out of this one, if you haven't gotten a kid already, is this is a very classic cocktail, and it's very elusive in its construction and its perfection, I guess is what we could say. And so I kind of want to demystify it a little bit, while in the same sense kind of providing some openness to the cocktail in case people have shoehorned themselves into one particular style. Without further ado, let's get started. We're going to have a few things that you will need, and if you direct yourself to the screen here, you will need a mixing vessel. I have here a nice little mixing glass that I use specifically for stirred cocktails, which these will all be stirred cocktails. You won't need to shake anything here. I have a cocktail spoon. I have a couple of them because we're going to be doing a couple of different drinks. I have a measuring device. I actually have a couple measuring devices because we'll be using a couple different things. And a strainer. This here is a julep strainer. However, if you have something similar to this, which is like what's called a Hawthorne strainer, that will also work, and we'll get into the differences when we get into actually making the cocktail. So if you don't have those things ready, take a couple of seconds and go and grab those things, and as well as your liquid team, which you will need some form of whiskey. We are going to be using Old Overhort Straight Rye whiskey for this particular class. And you will need as well both sweet and dry vermouth. We have two French vermouths here, both, I gotta get my rotation on here, both Doulin Sweet and Doulin Dry. If you don't have these particular vermouths, that's fine, just whatever vermouth you have in the house, but we will be using all of the vermouth styles with the exception of Blanco, which we'll get into that later. And then you will need some form of bitters. I have a couple. I have like a bitters blend here that I just brought for show. In the kit, we will have the Bitter Cube orange bitters. So go ahead and grab that if you don't have it. And some cherries. Delicious cherries. I have here Luxardo cherries, which is my preferred for a Manhattan. Any cherry that you have in your household is fine. So please go ahead and grab those, and we'll get into making you guys a first drink here real quick. Just gonna quickly cop out the chat. Ooh, everyone just saying hi. Hello, everyone. Hi, Mom. My mom's in the chat. And we're gonna do something a little different with this particular class. It's actually something I've never done before in an event. Let me get this back here. We're going to be doing a bracket because this is Manhattan Madness. So I have here a little bracket made up right here. I put the classic Manhattan as, of course, the number 1 seed. And then between the chat, we're going to decide between the dry or the perfect, which is able to take on the classic Manhattan for the champion Manhattan. I thought it was funny. All right, so without further ado, let's make a drink. Who's ready to make a drink? If you're ready to make a drink, go ahead and say hi to the chat. Also, please feel free to use this chat for any sort of questions that you may have. This is going to be my first event where I'm doing this solo, so I'm really relying on you guys here to give me any sort of questions if you have, and it's not just Manhattan related. If you have any just general cocktail questions, please go ahead and toss them in the chat, and I will address them as we kind of move forward there. But let's make a drink. So we are going to make first off a classic Manhattan. So you will need rye whiskey and sweet vermouth, those little guys right there, and your orange bitters. So go ahead and grab those items right there, and also make sure you have some ice, because we're going to need some ice. In fact, we need you grab some ice and toss it into your glass of choice, because we want to cool this glass down a little bit. If you are using a rocks glass, which is something like this, and you want to serve it with ice, you don't need to do this step. That's perfectly fine. However, I do feel that any stirred spirit-forward cocktail, such as like a Manhattan or a Sazerac or a Martini or Martinez or whatever, I always feel like those should be served in a coupe or Martini-style glass to prevent the drink from warming up in your hand or diluting itself. So get that, and then grab a couple ice for your stirring vessel. Just a couple, just go ahead and throw that in there. I'm just going to get about 3 or 4 cubes in there. A couple more won't hurt. You're then going to take your rye whiskey, and we are going to measure out 2 ounces of rye whiskey. And pour that right into your vessel. I'm going to get in as far as why we're doing these measurements and this amount. As we're enjoying this cocktail, I really just wanted to get everybody a drink real quick because it is 7 o'clock and we all need a drink. So we're going to put that back, and we're going to grab our sweet vermouth right here. We're going to measure out 1 ounce sweet vermouth right into your vessel. And a good little kind of tip and trick here, you kind of see how there is ice breaking the surface of the liquid team. You want to make sure you have that, because this is going to dilute over time as we stir it, so you want to make sure that you have enough ice to properly dilute the drink. Then take your bitters. If you do have these Bitter Cube orange bitters bottle, we're going to take 2 little eyedroppers right into your mixing vessel. If you're using Angostura or another type of aromatic bitters, 2 to 3 dashes, whatever your preferred. This is kind of like your salt and pepper moment, your seasoning moment. If you like a little more, go nuts. No one's gonna chastise you here. Then we're gonna take a spoon. And this nice little cocktail spoon here. Place the back end of the spoon on the side of the glass. And keeping the spoon on the outside of the glass, we're going to stir this drink. Now you want to try to keep the ice as one solid mass. That's going to prevent over dilution while still chilling the drink to a preferred level. And this is a higher quality ice, so I'm going to do this one probably a good 15 to 20 seconds. If you're using just the ice in your freezer at home, 10 seconds is probably good, because that is not as solid of an ice chunk. And if you stir it, like what you see in like cocktail books or on like cocktail recipes online, where they say like stir it for 30 to 40 seconds or shake it for a minute, you're gonna over dilute the drink, because the ice is not meant to. They're referencing like restaurant grade ice. If you have that, great. If you just have regular old like freezer ice, you don't want to over stir it. Then take your strainer, which we're going to use this julep strainer for this one. Plop it into your mixing vessel. Ditch the ice that was in your glass, chilling it down, and then strain into your vessel. And you should have a nice little amber color there. And lastly, boop, nice little cherry in there to top it off, and we have the classic Manhattan. Pretty easy, right? It's not a very difficult drink to make. However, it is something that a lot of people tend to like feel is elusive in its perfection. So if you haven't tried this already, go ahead and give it a shot. Really heavy rye notes up front. Got that caraway. And then the vermouth comes through at the end, really for me, along with like that orange brightness in the bitters, where you get the really heavy, strong, almost in some situations like where you put it in your face and it's going to be almost too strong if you're not really into spirit-forward cocktails. But then you have that sweetness of the vermouth to really round it out in your mouth and kind of calm down that alcohol burn that you get and create a really nice, balanced cocktail. Lovely. So, getting into why we did everything we did. This, in its core, is a pillar of cocktail in what is known as a 2-1-2. 2 part spirit, 1 part vermouth, 2 bitters. And that is the base formula for a Manhattan, and as well as many things like a Sazerac or a Martini, and a variety of other drinks that use that same formula. But Manhattan is definitely the popular. Was that one? No, Carmen, not 1-to-1. 2-1-2 are the ratios, and if you can even think about that as parts even. In this case, we used ounces. We used 2 ounces whiskey, 1 ounce vermouth, 2 dashes bitters. You could do that if you're making like batch cocktails as 2 cups or 2 buckets even. It's a complete ratio format, so that way you will always know exactly how much do you need. So for instance, you have this is an ounce and a half jigger here. You just know it's 2 of these to 1 vermouth, and you have a perfectly balanced Manhattan that way. And the one thing that is kind of fun about this drink is this is one of the cocktails that has always been around. It never really went away. And unlike so for instance, being in Wisconsin here, we all knew the old fashioned was a lifetime cocktail, but into the rest of the world and the rest of the United States, it totally just vanished off the face of the earth. And that was largely due to a variety of things, but one thing that always stuck around was the Manhattan. And it's kind of elusive as to why it always stuck around, probably because of its simplicity and like the fact that it used just 2 ingredients, and so it was always viewed as classic. Not really sure. The one thing that is constant with the Manhattan is like the fact that it is a drink that really has no exact origin. You can't trace it back to anything. It has a really fun, like kind of folklore-y fable to where it was invented in the 1880s in the 1870s at the Manhattan Club in Manhattan at a party for Winston Churchill's mother, Lady Rudolph Churchill. That was the fable, that it was made at this party in November of 1874 for a senator, and it was in her honor. The funny part is that she was in London giving birth to Winston Churchill at that time. So there was no way she could have been at that party that this drink was essentially invented for. The only solid evidence that we have is a printing from a book in 1880 where there was a bartender in Manhattan named William F. Marshall who is quoted that, and this is like my favorite thing about Manhattan lore, is that it was invented by a bartender named Black in I gotta read the full. 10 doors from 10 doors below Houston Street on Broadway. That's it. That was the quote, and it was like the most popular drink at the time. It's so enigmatic. It's perfect. Yes, of course, an elusive man named Black invented this perfect drink. Lovely. And it definitely was a popular cocktail at the time, primarily because all the things that were coming into the United States at the time is in the so cocktails really kind of begin in the late 1800s, like 1860s is like early cocktail times. And what determined a cocktail was spirit, sugar, water, bitters. And that was primarily to allow the consumption of bitters for medicinal purposes and make it so easy, make it easier to consume these particular products, they just threw sugar and booze at it so that you would literally wash down your medicine with booze. Come into like the 1870s, where you start to see larger imports coming into the United States, primarily in the forms of vermouth. Now, vermouth has been, we'll kind of can touch on this a little bit later in the stream, but vermouth is something that has been around since ancient, like there's traces back to ancient Rome and ancient China and ancient Persia. There's all sorts of like history traces back, but as far as commercial vermouth really kind of got its start in the late 1700s, and it really took off commercially in the late 1800s. And so you get vermouth coming to the United States, and sweet Italian vermouth is what came first. So we have rye whiskey, which was the most popular whiskey at the time. In this case, we're using Old Overhort rye, which was a Pennsylvania whiskey at the time, and most popular area whiskey at the time, mixed with the hot new thing that just arrived, and all the bartenders are going crazy about it. So of course, you just have a simple whiskey and vermouth cocktail. It's like this little floral notes kind of coming in. Lovely. What is kind of unique along with that is that you have not only Italian vermouth coming in, but you have a much new variety of vermouth coming in the case of French vermouth. And that we'll get into with our dry vermouth. Let's check the chat. We've got a couple of things coming in here. Is it rye whiskey because it's made with rye? Yes, it is rye whiskey because it's primarily made with rye. Great question. Rye was the more prominent grain in early America, and so rye whiskey was much more popular because that's what was available. It predates bourbon in many situations. And now it's become kind of coming back into that really high rye climate for rye whiskeys. Even this one, this Old Overhort rye, this is reminiscent of a specific, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this, type of rye. Did I have it written? Yeah. Monongahela rye, which is a river in Pennsylvania where this particular rye originated from. And it had a couple other things to go along with it, but long story short, rye was the most popular whiskey at the time, and that was what was used, which is why in Manhattan it's first called for with rye. I'm into it only for medicinal purpose. I'm assuming Trout Taylor that you don't like this particular drink. Is it too much alcohol, or what's our story here? Because it is a very spirit-forward cocktail, so it's not necessarily for everybody. Other things that you could mix with this if it was too much, brandy is a very popular thing for the Midwest here. It's also in other parts of the country, it may be called a Harvard Manhattan, because it was like that was what was a cognac and sweet vermouth. Manhattan was called a Harvard, and so like it kind of transitioned over into brandy as well. What are substitutes for rye whiskey for Manhattan? Yeah, so brand you literally you can do anything, but as far as for what makes it a Manhattan, rye is what makes it a Manhattan. So for instance, if you use Scotch, you would have a Rob Roy. If you use brandy, again, you'd have a Harvard or a Harvard Manhattan. But what makes the Manhattan part is, in this humble cocktail enthusiast opinion, is the rye whiskey with the sweet vermouth and the orange bitters. In many cases, orange bitters also predated Angostura bitters, because that's at least what was used in the first recipes of the drink, which, fun fact, the first printed recipe for a Manhattan also included curacao, which is an orange liqueur, and absinthe, along with gum syrup, which was a type of simple syrup that is combined with gum arabic to make it really, really silky and smooth and soft. Oh, if it's in PA, you definitely mispronounced it. I'm sure I did. I'm sure I mispronounced it. But that kind of gets us into how we got to the Manhattan, that we have Italian vermouth coming in, we have rye whiskey, really prevalent in the United States. We combine them together with a type of bitters, which was the thing to do with cocktails, and you have a Manhattan. The cherry garnish was part of the original recipe as well, but it just kind of pushes a dash of maraschino, which it's unknown if they meant maraschino cherry or actual maraschino liqueur, which was also being imported into the United States at around the same time. There we go. So what you kind of get next, I'm going to dump my ice here because we're going to need more ice coming soon, is you have dry vermouth coming into the United States after it. And dry vermouth really kind of originated, all vermouth essentially as we know it now, over what you're finding on our shelves here at Ray's, originated in Italy, specifically Piedmont, Italy, in the village of Turin. Very, very close to that is the region of Savoy, France, which is now called like Champagne, France, which it was a big disputed border for many, many, many years. So it has a very, very blended ethnic and cultural heritage in that area. So vermouth production is huge for that particular area, but stylistically they're different because they are geographically different, so you have different things growing. In fact, point of order, I can't believe I skipped over this as far as what defines a vermouth. We'll get into that. As we kind of get into the different botanicals, you have the root of all vermouth, which is wine, and essentially all vermouth is an aromatized wine, or wine with herbs and roots added for color and flavor. Now, what defines it as a vermouth is specifically wormwood, which derives from a Hungarian and German word Wermut. So you have literally it's with a W, and that loosely translates to wormwood in German Hungarian, or in Latin German Hungarian. I couldn't really figure out exactly where, but it's got those roots in Hungary and Germany. And that is the defining characteristic of vermouth as it's labeled. It's not a legal connotation, but historically, classically, traditionally, whatever you want to call it, vermouth and wormwood are what's going together. And in this case, sweet vermouth has sweet modifiers in it, and dry vermouth has dry modifiers added into it. So we're going to make now a dry vermouth, and then we'll a dry Manhattan, and then we'll get into more things on the vermouth aspects and what that does to your drink. So same thing as before if you're doing a coupe glass. Let's get our little cooking show screen here. Just a couple of ice cubes into the glass to chill it down as I throw ice across the room here. We're then going to add a couple of ice cubes to the mixing vessel. There we go. And this is going to be, let's get that out of the way here, get that on the mark. And this is going to be the same formula as before. So you're going to grab your rye whiskey. There's my glass. And you know what? I'm going to use a different vessel here, because we're going to use dry vermouth. And we're going to do 2 ounces of rye whiskey. Same ratios. Remember, 2, 1, 2. Close that up. And now instead, we're going to use dry vermouth. 1 ounce. Toss that in there. And same thing with your bitters. If you have the bitter cube, orange bitters, 2 droppers. Or 2 to 3 dashes out of your bitters bottle if it looks kind of like this. Just like, a couple 2, 3 dashes there. Just fine. Let's dump that. We get a fresh spoon. And same thing, keeping the back of the spoon on the back of the vessel, stirring it a couple of times around the pool. And if you're looking, you can kind of see that the ice is diluting and kind of shrinking down, and that's that water that's coming in there that's going to open up all of those flavors. it out. Take your strainer. If you want, you can use a Hawthorne strainer like this. I'll kind of show you how it works in this little mixing vessel. The reason, let's ditch the ice. The reason I prefer the julep style strainer to the Hawthorne strainer is when using it with certain vessels, what can happen is you can have the liquid team of the drink rubbing up against all these little spines here. And what that does is that aerates the drink. Now, that doesn't really sound like anything bad, but when it's like this type of stirred drink where it's like just very few ingredients and nothing acidic, those little aeration bubbles add texture to the drink, whereas the julep strainer creates a much softer roll out, and it helps the drink keep that really silky smooth texture and doesn't add any aeration to the drink. And you can do a cherry with this one. However, with a dry, I like to just take a little orange zest with my dry. So I'm going to take a little channel peeler here and get an orange twist going. And just drop it right in there. I see a couple questions coming in. I had no idea the stir had such method to it. How do you twist the spoon to keep the curve in the back? Oh, great question. So if you're just using, a cocktail spoon like this, really you just kind of want to lightly put. Let me get it in view here. It's a little difficult if you're not using a cocktail spoon because that's what these little spindles are for, right there. And you want to put it towards the back and just let the weight of the spoon kind of guide your hand around and utilize like your fingers, like your two, like kind of like you're holding. Like almost like you're about to hold chopsticks, and kind of provide some light pressure to the back of the spoon, and that really kind of keeps it along the back. And this is like something that takes like a little bit of practice. It blows my mind when you go to like an actual like cocktail lounge and you see like the dudes and gals that are shaking while they're stirring and like keeping it perfect and like throwing the spoons and doing all kind of sorts of fun stuff with there. But just make sure you're kind of providing some light pressure with your finger here on the back of the spoon, and that really helps it kind of keep it. And just like kind of try it empty on a glass like this and like slowly lower it down, and that'll also kind of help get the feel for it. I know you do the stir method. Yeah, it's one of those things to where like if you like look at drinks, like especially drinks like this to where it's so little, and if you like kind of start reading up on it, like that's you'll get people that like, I stir for 45 rotations exactly. It's like easy. But if you have not tried your dry Manhattan yet, go ahead and give that a little bit of a little smell and sip. Now, this is something that I'm sure most people have not tried. If you have not had this before this stream, please go ahead and throw it in the chat. Because I didn't really have one until probably about a year ago is when I realized, like, I have never had this. I'm going to try this out. And it's kind of sneaky for me. Like, it really, to me, kind of brings out more of the barrel notes in the rye. Like, I get more, like, chocolate kind of coming through, which, like, on the, as far as from the rye and the whiskey, whereas I get more of the, probably because of the vermouth, like the fruity tones of the rye. I get more of the spicy characters of the rye in a dry Manhattan. And like kind of to me makes it almost more of a with meal or with food cocktail, weirdly. Yeah. But this is not the original probably vermouth that they would have used in making a dry Manhattan. So kind of give you like a point of order here. You have the classic Manhattan that we tried with the sweet vermouth. You most likely had another Italian style vermouth coming in that was a little drier, or a Blanco style, into which you had it be a little bit sweeter. That was probably I don't even know why I'm trying to do this right now. It's It's unknown. It's funny because it's unknown. Like, you have no like hard concrete evidence for it, so it's all very conjecture. One thing that I do for sure speculate is that this definitely predated the martini. And the one thing that predated the martini also was something called the Martinez, which is gin, sweet vermouth, and orange bitters. And so you have like this kind of bridge between a Manhattan and a martini being that Martinez. And so it's only natural that you have also a dry style, which a martini is gin, dry vermouth, orange bitters. Now we have it with the rye. So if you want, you could also do like a really fun Martinez Manhattan four-way kind of taste test thing and see which ones you guys like the most. It's our first time with dry. I like it. Michael prefers sweet. First time you're here too. That's more like a martini. Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's I would be surprised if the chat blew up that they would love this, because it's not sweet. It's dry. And French dry vermouth is definitely like the driest of the dry vermouths. Doulin is a little bit less dry than, say, like Noilly Prat, which is a Marseille vermouth, which is a classically drier style. But it's definitely going to make it a little more, like, obviously, like, I'm trying to think of like other words than not sweet. So like I get more like savory notes out of it. I get more spicy notes out of it. Yeah. Yeah, definitely dry makes me think like martini. For sure, but yeah. I see, yeah, but I get like, I'd love, oh man, I'm just getting like this huge chocolate off of there. Man, crazy. But yeah, but kind of wheeling back into vermouth, and this is where now we have two different styles of Manhattans with the same whiskey but two different vermouths, and we can agree that they are vastly, vastly different. So what does that mean for you at home? So think of it this way. All vermouth is proprietary, into which that every bottle of vermouth that you see on the shelf is a different blend of botanicals, flavors, and things. So you could just do something as simple as grabbing a different bottle of vermouth and to get a totally different cocktail. So for instance, for the sweet, we use the Doulin Rouge here, right here. Let me get this out of here. Probably what you hear is most people will probably have had in their bars for Manhattans are Martini and Rossi or Camparo Antica, which are fantastic vermouths and arguably what I should have used. The reason I didn't is cost. I wanted to keep it a little more affordable for you guys. Because that Antique is expensive. But Camparo right here, I'm skipping the end. This guy is credited for being, like, we'll say the modern father of vermouth, into which he, Antonio Carpano, developed the Torino-style sweet vermouth that really got it off of the ground and commercialized and beginning to import it into the United States. The fun thing about it is specifically that Camparo Antica, wasn't made until 1990, in which it's not an old traditional style. Like, it totally looks like it's an old traditional style. No, it's a new thing they made. And it's a style of vermouth called Vermouth de Vanilla, into which there's vanilla added. So it's incredibly sweet on the palate, which is one of the reasons why, like, I think a lot of people like it, and specifically why it pairs with the Manhattan, because vanilla is also a prevalent flavor in barrel aging, which is what you need to do to make whiskey. And so you have this swimming of vanilla and cinnamon and spices, and it just ends up being lovely. Lots of differences in tips, and yes, like gobs and gobs and gobs. Into which there's also like bitter styles of vermouth. Like, I use Koki. Yes, Koki is probably the closest. The basic Koki is probably the closest to the traditional Torino style. But even that is a new product. They wanted to kind of go back to the vermouth's heyday and to create a more Torino style vermouth, and that's why on the label it's Vermouth di Torino, but that they wanted to go back to that. There is a Carpano formula as well that's supposed to be prevalent to the classic style. However, that recipe is lost. It's like the Coca-Cola recipe. It was like 50 some ingredients and only one guy knew it and he died. So I don't think anybody knows it anymore. Or they're just keeping it under lock and key and I don't know. Who knows? Where was it? Oh, I lost my spot here. Oh man. Oh man. Sorry folks, I lost my spot here. I'm gonna get it back. Oh yeah, so really, but this like kind of sums into where all vermouths are aromatized wines, but not everything is labeled a vermouth, into which there's other things that you could also use, such things as like Punt de Mes, which is another product also ironically made by the Carpano family, but has a bitter component added to it, so it would be like more so a vermouth calm bitter, or Kinato is another word that they'll use, and that'd be like there's another type of cookie, and I'm blanking on the name of it right now. I apologize. But really what I want, like, to sum this all up, to end my babbling, to sum this all up, there are immense amounts of styles that you could use, from the Italian styles that we talked about to new American styles that are coming through that don't necessarily use wormwood, because there's no legal connotation to using wormwood in vermouth. It's more of a tradition thing, and new world producers are like, we can throw in whatever we want in there. So you're finding really fun, fascinating new blends like this Rockwell, which is a favorite here at Ray's, or to a lot of Spanish styles, which didn't really come into the fray until like the 1960s, that use all sorts of like Spanish botanicals and from the region of Juarez to get like, I find that Spanish vermouths give like that sweet flavor while still giving you like a huge floral note. Like there's endless possibilities. Like the bold cardamom flavors of the Rababaro. Oh man, so we're getting, yeah, so Campari and Rababaro, those would be Amaros, to which, or Campari is an aperitif liqueur, into which neither of those are wine based. Which the one constant in all vermouths and aperitif wines is the wine factor. Using a liqueur is absolutely something you could do. It would change the drink slightly. You're kind of flirting with Boulevardier land. However, there is a variant of a Manhattan called a Black Manhattan, into which it uses Amaro, such as like Punta Mas, or the Rababaro, which I do love Rababaro as well. Personal favorite with Mezcal. But what that does is typically Amaro is a darker color, so it would turn your drink a much richer, bolder, almost black color, and so hence the name. Then we do need to do a vermouth tasting when the pandemic is over. Yes. Absolutely, there are boundless possibilities what we could absolutely do for that. Templeton rye, yeah, Templeton's very, very classic rye. Absolutely, I think it gives it like a lot more fruit notes and little less spicy notes, and I believe it uses a bit more rye than the old Overholt that we're using here today. Fun fact, like this recipe is a bit of a deviation from their original recipe, which was just rye and barley. When Jim Beam bought old Overholt in the 1980s, they shifted their production from Pennsylvania to Kentucky and thus added in corn into the mash bill to make it a more bourbon fans rye. And while you could argue that changed it for the worse, it's now one of the more prevalent cocktail ryes that you'll find in a lot of bars. For one, its affordability, and two, its versatility. Oh yes. Okay, so vermouth tasting is going to be on the books for sure. So I think we're ready for the perfect Manhattan. I think so. I think we can do that. I think we're doing pretty good here. So again, we're going to grab our rye whiskey. Let me get my cooking show screen here going. Grab your rye whiskey. And, almost skipped a first step. I have like way too many drinks in front of me here. And we're going to chill that glass Nothing sucks the flavor out of a drink more than a warm glass. Got a big little ice chunk there. And then some ice into your vessel. Got ice chunks here happening, folks. Here, sorry, here we go. There we go. Okay, lots of ice. 2 ounces for the perfect Manhattan. Perfect in quotes. It's the name. I didn't invent it. Perfect. 2 ounces of rye. And hopefully everybody didn't kill off all of their Manhattans already. I would be impressed if you did, because remember, we're going to bracketize these and taste test them bet next to each other. Grab your 2 vermouths. Go ahead and throw in half ounce of your sweet. Just a half ounce. Followed by half ounce of your dry. Half ounce of the dry dough in there. There we go. Right in there. Followed by your orange bitters. Now one thing that you do see is there is a there is a style of perfect Manhattan out there by Dale DeGoff, who is arguably the father of cocktail renaissance. He uses a pimento bitters in his perfect Manhattan. This is a nut bitters, which pimento is like allspice, and this nut drops and dashes bitters uses a variety of pimento saber. So like if you, I wanted to include it in this particular kit. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough of it available. We do have it here at Ray's. I highly recommend it if you're a Manhattan fan, trying it out. It's really, really great. And what we're gonna do then is, if you got your bitters in there, go ahead and we're gonna give that a stir. We weren't supposed to polish off each before moving on. I mean, you can make another one. I'm just impressed. No rules here. Hiccup. Devil. Repeat for. I also do a splash of corn. Yes. Sometimes if I'm feeling a particularly sweet Manhattan, and actually, dude, fun fact, Dale, that's a great call, because that is like what they did with the original. As to kind of circle back, they did add in some curacao, which is an orange liqueur. Cointreau is a particularly dry, arguably the original triple sec, so it'd be a great addition. I will sometimes throw in a little bit of a bar spoon of the Luxardo cherry juice if I'm feeling I want something particularly desserty or sweet. Now, once we get that nice and stirred, strainer and strain into that glass. And we're going to get that out of here now because I don't need it anymore. And so we have the classic, the dry, and the perfect, complete with cherry. I do prefer cherry with this one, because I feel like it just plays off of the sweet vermouth. So go ahead and give that a try. Please repeat formula. Oh, it's 2 ounces rye whiskey, half ounce sweet vermouth, half ounce dry vermouth. So the two vermouths total make up your 1 ounce, which is your 2-1-2. So you're blending those two. Throw in the chat what you guys think. If you like it, hate it, indifferent. So this one for me, I am not personally a perfect Manhattan fan. I like the two on their own. I feel like, at least in this particular style, I have done a couple with some different vermouth blends. Like one of my favorite vermouth blends is I'll take the Coqui and a Spanish vermouth, something really, really sweet and something kind of floral, and blend those two. But as far as with this one, yeah, I'm on the fence with it yet. Let's check chat. We're going to finish. I hope you're going to finish them all beverages. I hope, waste not one. No, I have to drive. Well, I am still at work. I have to be a presentable human. So, shortly, yes. No absinthe. Absinthe was an optional additive to the original Manhattan. I didn't include that in any of these recipes because I feel like that flirts more with Sazerac land, which does call for an absinthe rinse. So I didn't really include that in anything with these particular. I want to love it because it's perfect in the name. I mean, I'm sure the name for perfect was that you probably it was like a Hatfield McCoy's kind of thing, like sweet, dry. Let's make a perfect one. Possibly, I don't know. But go ahead and throw it in. What you guys think? Okay. Yeah. So I'm like this. I get more of the spicy notes out of the vermouth in this kind of style. Like the floralness of the dry kind of help elevates those spicier notes, and I get definitely more orange in the perfect than I do in the classic. I think it gets a little drowned out per se, but whereas this I kind of can definitely get a little more. Too much height sets the bar too high. Best of both worlds, sweet and dry. This is growing on me. Yep. It's got that chocolatey thing still kind of coming through that the dry had, while still being nice and sweet and kind of rounding out that alcohol burn that you would get off of the rye. Overall, pretty solid. So I'm gonna need some help here because it's bracket time. Remember I said we're going to do a bracket. So I obviously put the classic as the number one seed. Like it's the Yukon of these particular cocktails here. So go ahead and we're going to do some votes. Vote dry or perfect to take on the classic. Go ahead and throw that in the chat and we'll add that in there. I'm going to double check the chat now here too. So partial to classic. Don't even put dry vermouth in martinis, just gin. Mr. makes one called Verde that uses Strega instead of dry, and that sounds interesting. That sounds pretty great. Yeah, it's kind of Brad, to kind of circle back. You don't even put dry vermouth in your martinis. That was a very common trend post Prohibition. The taste for vermouth got less and less and less and less and less, into which it was becoming more and more fashionable to make it drier, which was less vermouth. Like a dry martini was less vermouth, or an extra dry, like more gin, less vermouth. In the classic Churchill, I look at the unopened bottle of vermouth across the hall. The fun thing with vermouth is even with that, it's still part of the cocktail, right? Like, you wave it over your drink or you look at it across the room. Like, it's that iconic to these cocktails that it still has to be part of the recipe in some form. And that's one of the things I love about vermouth. Classic, but 3-1, 3 dashes a bit. I always recommend starting off light and then adding in, but I'm a very heavy bitters pourer personally. Like, I like to taste those things. It's like, so I'll add in 3, 4, sometimes 5 to 6, depending on what the drink is. Tangent, what makes it a martini then? We'll get into that. 1 vote for dry, then 1 vote for perfect. Use Luxardo dipped. Yes, I do love that method. I would call the perfect one balanced and vote for that one. Absolutely. Dad wants to know where the Busch Light fits into the bracket. Thanks, Mom. You're going to have a chaser, right? Have a chaser. Huge difference with the vermouths. Yes. Perfect over dry. So I'm seeing that everyone is voting for perfect. So we're going to put the perfect into the bracket here. I'm just gonna hopefully spell this, not mess up the spell. So there we go. So we got this going. Now, Bush's chaser. So now let's take our side-by-sides here. It's kind of fun to see the color. I applauded the glare is kind of rough in this shot here, but you can kind of see. So this is my regular, this is my perfect. The color differences, like how the perfect, just that little bit of lighter color. Yeah. So go ahead and retry both of them. Oh, going back to that classic though. It hits. Slaps. I'm seeing a yes bitters. Yes bitters. Ah. I see a vote for classic. Yeah, go ahead and throw your votes between the perfect and the classic. And we'll and then also if you guys have any cocktail specific questions, please go ahead and throw them in. I'd be more than happy to answer it. That classic though, it's pretty great. It is the OG for a reason. I think I'm just gonna decide which one I'm gonna keep going back to, and that's gonna be my vote going forward. Okay. Classic over perfect by a went. 2 votes for classic. Yeah, I mean this is a landslide, right? It's so serendipitous that this came first in this string of events. Because this cocktail this cocktail predated the old fashioned in a way. It's not because we got to the old fashioned because it was just called a cocktail before, and when vermouth hit the scene, they needed to call it something because they would ask for a Manhattan cocktail, or they would ask for a cocktail, and people would bring them something that resembled this, and it was no, I want an old-fashioned cocktail, and that's where we got that. So this in a way predates our classic Wisconsin old-fashioned. If you don't want to water it down but want ice, use a block. That is so that is a method. You could use a rocks glass and use a big chunk of ice to not dilute it. I personally just always love the stemmed glass for any spirit or any classically up drink. Just kind of adds that elegance to it for me. It also seems way more fancy. But I totally get, I'll sometimes do Negroni with a block instead of crush it, because I want to just let that really intense bitterness kind of sit around a little bit longer. Yeah. But I think we're going to call it for classic as the champion of Manhattans. You saw it here, folks. You saw it here first. The classic wins. Oh, check the chat. I've been at cocktail bars where there are other ingredients and they were delicious than whiskey, vermouth, and bitters. What are those things, and in what ratios? Are you, Joanne? Are you referring to specifically a Manhattan at these cocktail bars? Maybe need a little bit more elaboration there. How do you feel about Cold Stones? If that is definitely the best way if you want to cool your drink without, or if you want to keep your drink cold without adding in water. I would argue that they tend to inhibit because they don't really get out of your way. I would keep it mostly for neat whiskey drinks if you wanted that. And with a cocktail sense, I would say chill your glass, and because that's what sucks out most of the heat, or sucks out most of the chillness of your cocktail more than anything, is your warm glass. Chill your glass down, and you won't really have need for those rocks, and then you won't have to also dilute your drink. So there are other than whiskey from. So probably these labeled Manhattans that you received that probably followed the formula of the 2-1-2, I'm guessing, and used those things. Like, so for instance, if you were using, I've made a Manhattan the other day, a Manhattan style with, I use añejo tequila, and I split it between sweet vermouth and a rababaro. I see that got called in there. I did 2 ounces of tequila, half ounce sweet vermouth, half ounce rababaro, and I did a little bit of, I did like some chocolate bitters and some aromatic bitters. I kind of went a little nuts with it. So as long as you're keeping to the formula, you can mix and match whatever you want. I kind of hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, please tell me no, it didn't. I'll see if I can elaborate more. Otherwise, like, yay. Cold Stones, aka Tooth Chippers. Yeah, kind of fly at you. Thank you, Dale. Thank you for the great chat. Yes, this was super, super, super fun to do. Really excited. It was kind of fun to be able to show 3 different drinks of the same type. Really, really fun. I'm going to sip on this classic a little more. My mom in all caps, go nuts. Thank you, Renee. My mom. All right. Oh, okay. I think that's real. Unless there's more cocktail questions I want to hop into the chat. That's my show, guys. It's 8 o'clock. I know I originally I should have. I'm sorry. I should have touched on this earlier. Like, I put 8:30 in case there's like some runoff questions towards the end and we run over. I don't want people to like feel like that they have to hop off right away. But that's the show. That's what I got. So feel free to kind of like hang in the chat, throw in some other questions for me. I'll sit around here for a little bit just drinking Manhattans with you guys. It's super fun. I've done a salted caramel Manhattan with half-ounce Torrini salted caramel and half-ounce sweet from that. So, okay. So now we're getting into a little bit of like liqueur action, which is like a bit of a stretch for the formula, but I like it. You're kind of doing like a riff on a Daisy meets 212 there, like which a Daisy is a spirit, citrus, sugar liqueur, where you're kind of adding that in there. I think that sounds great. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm seeing lots of thank yous. Thank you for coming here. I'm seeing when is the next one. The next class, it's not up yet. It will be up this week. I do promise. Cross my heart. It's going to be delicious daisies. So a daisy, as I was just kind of talking about, is a spirit, sugar, citrus liqueur, or what you may also known as a margarita, a sidecar, and we'll be doing a cosmopolitan in that particular class. And kits will be available that you can make all 3 drinks, and that will be on April 26th. Will be that class Thursday. April 26th will be the delicious daisies class. So please go ahead and snag that if you enjoyed this class. Also recommend this to your friends if you want to check this out. And kits will still be available. If you know somebody who wanted to see this class but missed it or missed getting a kit, I still have kits available, and they will be able to watch this class on our YouTube channel in this entire form and follow along and get it. They can get a kit tomorrow and do it a week from now. So these will be on. Will I be teaching? Yes, I will be teaching. And yes, Sean, we're doing a Cosmo. We're gonna do a Cosmo. Not the slum cocktail that it may be. It's a classy drink. We're gonna get into that. Thank you so much, everyone. If there's no other questions, I will be logging off shortly. Really, really, again, appreciate everybody for coming out. I'm all verklempt. You guys are great. Thank you so much. I'm gonna drink a little bit more Manhattan here. Cosmo Marg and a sidecar. I'm behind. Yes, you are. 3 and I'm feeling good. Thanks to great. Yes, like this was super fun. I was really, really nervous doing this by myself and not having like anybody. I'm in a room by myself talking to a camera. I feel a little insane. So this is really fun, though. Thank you guys for providing some bounce back. Appreciate it. Cheers. All right. Thank you. All right. Okay, bye. Thank